A prank is usually intended to make somebody look foolish, by making them believe something that isn't true, scaring them, or performing a mischievous act at their expense. Generally speaking though, most pranks are in good fun, with the pranksters usually not expecting very many or any consequences for their actions. But what happens when people put themselves in danger, accidents happen, and victims retaliate? That's exactly what we'll be covering today. I'm East Coast Vandal, your one-stop shop for the craziest stories that actually happened, and this is 5 pranks that turned tragic. Seth Stonerock and Derek Greenlee. Seth Stonerock and Derek Greenlee were 2 teenage boys from rural Ohio who would often find themselves pulling pranks and posting them online to brag about. In August of 2011, the 2 would make a post about how they had wrapped a stop sign completely in plastic wrap, obscuring it from view. A seemingly simple prank, and on the surface relatively harmless, as the plastic would only need to be cut away, leaving no lasting damage to the sign. This is, however, until later that night when 2 elderly sisters, Mary Sprangler and Jean Shea, took a drive to that very intersection on Huber Hitler Road where the stop sign was obscured. And yes, that is the real name of the road. When the sisters drove through the intersection without stopping, as they had no idea that the stop sign was even there, they would be struck by an SUV that had the right of way. Mary would unfortunately die in the accident, and Jean would go through a total of 7 surgeries before passing away herself only 3 weeks later. Mary was 85 and Jean was 81 respectively. Following the incident, Seth and Derek would be charged with tampering with a traffic control device and involuntary manslaughter. Although Derek purchased the plastic wrap, he would not actually partake in the wrapping of the sign, even staying back in the vehicle and telling Seth that he didn't believe it was a good idea. As a result, Derek would have his charges dropped, and Seth would accept full responsibility for the tragic events that had occurred. The judge would later say that he believed Seth was not the worst criminal in the world, but couldn't move past the fact that because of him, 2 innocent lives were lost. Seth would be sentenced to jail for 4 years and be released after just 8 months. Hey, it's me. Real quick, if you liked the video so far, please consider liking it to help the algorithm and subscribing to see more content like this. Alright, back to it. Willie Nobel. In February of 2014, a group of teenagers visited the home of their friend, attempting to cover his car in mayonnaise and toilet paper, payback for a prank that he had pulled on them earlier. However, what was intended to be good fun between friends later changed when the father of the friend, 48-year-old Willie Nobel, exited the home, and as the teenagers gathered in a car to drive away, fired 5 shots at the vehicle. They would flee to a nearby come-and-go convenience store and call the police. While the police questioned Nobel, he informed them that he was not trying to shoot anyone, simply scare them. He believed that he had succeeded in this goal, however when he asked if anyone was hurt, the police had informed him that this was actually a murder investigation. That is because one of the shots fired by Nobel flew into the vehicle, striking and killing 15-year-old Adrian Broadway. Nobel would ultimately be charged and found guilty of murder in the first degree. He would be sentenced to jail for 30 years, and he'll be eligible for parole in 2036. James Luther Mcrae. In October of 2010, 34-year-old James Luther Mcrae would notice approximately 4 teenagers on his property, calling 911 to report a potential home invasion on his or a nearby property. Mcrae was a firefighter and went out to confront the teens, even getting into his own pickup truck with an attached trailer, and chased the teens who had gone into their own vehicle and began to drive away. While still on the phone with authorities, Mcrae would attempt to drive close enough to the teens' vehicle to write down their license plate number. But after a nearly 3-mile chase, Mcrae would lose control of his truck, drive through a fence, and roll the vehicle, ultimately throwing himself from said vehicle, since he was not wearing his seatbelt. Mcrae would be pronounced dead at the scene. The teenagers running from Mcrae would later be revealed to be 3 female teenagers, under the age of 18, and one 18-year-old boy. They were in two neighboring yards throwing toilet paper in celebration of homecoming. Likely due to the fact that Mcrae was driving recklessly by remaining on the phone, as well as not following traffic laws, no one would be charged with his death, although from that point on, the town would begin cracking down on juvenile pranks much harder. Jacintha Saldanha. Jacintha Saldanha was an Indian-born nurse who was living and working in London since around 2002. However, on December 2, 2012, St. James Palace would announce that the Duchess of Cambridge was pregnant and happened to be a patient of the hospital where Saldanha was working. Although the Duchess was just being treated for morning sickness, the news was very highly publicized. 2 days later, Mel Gregg and Mike Christian, two radio hosts from Sydney, Australia, would contact Saldanha, impersonating Elizabeth II and the Prince of Wales, attempting to gain information about the Duchess. Information that was not available to the public. Unfortunately, Saldanha would be fooled by this prank and pass them through to the nurse who was taking care of the Duchess, whom they would also trick with what Mel and Mike would call ridiculous comedy accents. The radio station later claimed to have attempted to contact the nurses a total of 5 times, but when they were unable to do so, they released the call the following day anyway, without the nurses' consent. Although the hospital would call out the station's trickery, and no actions would be taken against the nurses involved, Saldanha would later be found dead in the nurses' quarters where she was currently staying at the hospital where she worked, of an apparent hanging only 2 days later. Although some claim Saldanha had a history of mental illness, 3 notes would be found by her body, one condemning the hospital's handling of the situation, another explaining her burial requests, and a final note blaming the radio station for her death. The radio show where the call was broadcast would later be cancelled a month later, and after a lawsuit and varying times of absences, both Mel and Mike would return to work in radio. Jordan Morlan. Jordan was a 16-year-old boy from Louisville, Kentucky who loved to play pranks on his family, and more specifically, his younger sister. In late September, with Halloween fast approaching, with the help of his little sister, Jordan began decorating the front yard in preparation. One such decoration, and arguably an image of Halloween, was the noose. Throwing the noose up into the tree and hanging it there, Jordan figured that this was the perfect time to pull a little prank on his sister, and in an attempt to scare her, placed the noose around his neck. Unfortunately, it is likely that Jordan lost his footing and became disoriented after putting the noose on, even going as far as passing out as it tightened around his neck. When his sister ran into the house to alert their mother that Jordan had hung himself from the tree, their mother initially brushed it off, just telling her it's just another prank like he plays on us so often. However, when she was alerted to the fact that he was drooling from the mouth, she rushed outside to find him exactly how the little sister had described. Ginger Rodriguez, Jordan's mother, would attempt to lift him up or to cut the rope, but would ultimately be unsuccessful until paramedics arrived and took him to a nearby hospital. Jordan would be placed on life support until he died of organ failure roughly 12 hours later. Jordan had dreamed of joining the Marines and was a member of the ROTC rifle team, as well as an honor student. Well, that's it for now. Did you learn something new tonight? If so, please consider liking the video to help out the algorithm and subscribe to get more content like this. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at East Coast Vandal and on Twitter at VandalEast. Stay safe, stay calm, just don't look behind you. I'll see you next time.